Negotiations over the proposed peace plan for Gaza have been very successful. He expects the first phase of the plan to be completed by the end of the week. A 17-year-old boy and a 43-year-old woman were killed while 14 others have been injured in a shooting in Alabama's capital, Montgomery. Police say that multiple individuals pulled out weapons and started firing after a shooter fired the first shots. No arrests have been announced so far. An investigation into this tragedy is underway. Activists detained by Israel authorities from the Global Summit flotilla continue returning home, with citizens of Spain, Tunisia now landing in their home countries after being deported. Police are investigating the crime scene in Sydney's inner west after a man allegedly fired around 50 bullets at passing cars from his property, wounding at least 16 people. The suspect is under custody, and police have also recovered 2 rifles from the scene. Wildfires have destroyed nearly 400 hectares in the northern area of the French island of Corsica. Now, according to authorities, nearly 185 fighters, 50 vehicles and 4 aircrafts were mobilized to tackle the blaze. France has announced the composition of a new government led by Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu. Lecornu's 2 predecessors were ousted over efforts to rein in France's budget deficit, the largest in the Eurozone. Australia has signed a new defence agreement with Papua New Guinea, its first in more than 70 years. Now, Canberra is seeking to block China from expanding its security presence in the Indo-Pacific. Rescue operations in Indonesia's tragedy after the school roof collapse has now reached its final stage. The death toll has now climbed to 49. Well, viewers, those were the headlines, and our top focus. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has highlighted that U.S. President Donald Trump is ordering 400 members of the Texas National Guard to be deployed to Illinois, Oregon, and other locations. The Illinois governor has further noted that no federal officials contacted him directly to discuss or coordinate the action. Moreover, he has described the move as an unauthorized invasion, stating that it commenced with federal agents and would now include members of the Illinois National Guard as well as additional troops from other states. Additionally, Pritzker has called on Texas Governor Greg Abbott to withdraw support and refuse coordination, warning that such actions bypass state sovereignty. He has also emphasized that National Guard personnel must not be used as political tools. The deployment to Illinois is part of a broader plan targeting Democratic-led cities, including Washington, Los Angeles, Memphis, Portland, and Chicago. The move raises legal and constitutional questions, as National Guard troops are usually controlled by state governors, and federal domestic use of the military is limited by law. Moreover, in Chicago, protests over immigration enforcement have grown outside ICE facilities. The White House has recently authorized about 300 National Guard members to protect federal officers and assets, especially amid rising tensions. Now, following this order, the Illinois governor has warned that the deployment could spark more protests and has accused the administration of, in fact, creating a quote-unquote war zone in order to justify its actions. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Charles Thompson, an Australian journalist joining us from Sydney. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've been seeing the Trump administration increasingly deploy National Guard troops. Trump claims that this is to rein in the increasing menace of crime that has been plaguing Democratic-led cities. He's in fact done so in Washington, D.C. earlier, tried to do so in Los Angeles. That was challenged by the state of California. And in Oregon, too, we've recently seen a court block Trump's bid to do so. Do you think, what do you think will happen in the case of Illinois? Do you think they'll be moving to court? What are the legal implications of this showdown?
Well, okay. So when we're talking about the United States, it's quite different, surprisingly, from other Western nations. And that's for two reasons. And I'm speaking from Australia. The first is in Australia, we have zero tolerance for illegal immigration. In the United States, it's had an open door policy. As long as you got in and you could get in on a visa, and if you overstayed, it didn't matter. So there's so many people in the United States who don't have visas. And now the federal government is trying to remove them. And naturally, if you've got somebody living next door for you for 5 or 10 years who you didn't know didn't have a visa, you have some connection with them. So I can understand that. But, you know, this was bound to happen. The other part, of course, is, and I still can't get my head around it, a lot of judges are appointed by politicians. So when judges give decisions, they're politically biased, whether it's Democrat or whether it's Republican. So that one I always find a little bit difficult to swallow.
Indeed, and do you think this could move up the rung eventually? And because we've been seeing federal courts now trying to block the Trump administration's bid to do so, do you think this has a possibility of escalating to the point that it could now go to the US Supreme Court as well down the line?
Of course, but interestingly, what the Supreme Court of the United States has been doing in nearly all the cases, it's pushed to that you have to exhaust the legal procedures before you can get there. And that means it can take a long time. And sometimes these have a way of either resolving themselves or moving on to something else. So, yeah, of course, the intermediate courts might put temporary blocks, but as we can see, when it finally does reach the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States is pretty conservative, and it generally supports whatever, within reason, legally, the government of the United States is doing.
Indeed, and we've been seeing a lot of protests also crop up in Portland, in Memphis, in Chicago recently. ICE agents were deployed, and interestingly, there were some videos that have been circulating around social media where local police, the city police officials have now been, in fact, in sort of a way been sidelined as compared to the National Guard troops and ICE agents on the ground who are implementing Trump's anti-illegal immigration drive. What do you make of this tussle on the ground?
Once again, so people have just become accustomed in the United States to people staying without proper visas or having proper documentation. And the local authorities, the local state authorities, probably even have relatives or friends that don't have proper paperwork. So it's a very sensitive point. Whereas in other countries, whether it's Australia, whether it be in India, if you don't have proper documents and you're caught, you're deported. You don't have people jumping up and down. Certainly, if there is strong grounds on an individual or a family on some compassionate grounds that they've added some contribution, those are special examples. But normally, as a rule of thumb, whether it's Australia, whether it's India, or any other well-managed country, there's zero tolerance for citizens without proper paperwork. And the United States has just been one of these blaringly different types. I mean, so many Indians crossed the border through Mexico, knowing that once they got in, and I have friends over the years, Nepali and Indian, who got into America. And and the only catch was that whilst they were trying to process their paperwork, and some it took 5, 10, or 15 years, they couldn't leave the United States.
All right, so I request you stay on with us. So we're tracking further updates. We're shifting focus away from the United States of America towards Europe. We're now learning that intense Ukrainian strikes in the Belgorod region of Russia have left residents without power. The governor of Belgorod has stated that around 40,000 residents have been impacted by this shelling that has taken place. He's added that the damage to power supply facilities was caused by the strikes and has assured that all necessary work is underway to restore power to residential buildings, social facilities and commercial enterprises. Meanwhile, Russia maintains that it shot down 251 Ukrainian drones overnight. Now, this attack on Belgorod comes as Russia had earlier targeted Kharkiv, the neighboring Ukrainian territory. The front lines remain active as both Russia and Ukraine continue attacking critical infrastructure facilities. With us on the broadcast is Julia Kazdobina, Senior Fellow of Ukrainian Prism, joining us from Kiev. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Interestingly, we're seeing attacks, especially on critical energy infrastructure, continue on both sides of the border. Winter is setting in as well, which means that energy needs will be driving up very, very soon. In light of this, what are the consequences for the civilians in particular?
Well, attacks are happening, and actually attacking Russian energy infrastructure, that's the tactic that Ukraine adopted very recently. Russia started doing that in October 2022, and they have been unsuccessful for a while. But now that the U.S. has withdrawn its support, because a lot of support for Ukrainian critical infrastructure came from USAID, now that that support is no longer there, Ukrainian critical infrastructure is a lot more vulnerable to Russian attacks. And also Russia has modified its approach to attacking. They are now more efficient because they usually swarm, and a large number of attack or missiles or drones are directed in one place. So it's getting Ukrainian air defense system overloaded, and so Ukraine is already experiencing at least border areas, Sumy Oblast and Chernihiv Oblast. They are already experiencing electricity shortages, and some parts of Chernihiv Oblast have been without electricity supply for several days, but it's a very patchy situation because some areas are okay, some areas are without electricity. And but the Ukrainian population, we have already lived through 2 winters of Russian attacks on energy infrastructure, and so people are preparing, and they have bought electricity generators, they have bought power banks, they have bought other things that can help them get through the cold winter, and people are preparing.
And speaking of energy infrastructure in the United States of America in particular, we've recently seen Donald Trump state that he will be providing intel to Ukraine with regards to Russia's energy infrastructure. And he's also, in fact, urged NATO countries to do so as well. Up until now, with regards to the drone incursions, we've seen that NATO has taken, and NATO's response is very calibrated. They're not trying to escalate at the moment, and they're not towing the line. Do you think NATO should now heed Donald Trump's call?
Well, I mean, energy is the key source of income for the Russian budget, and is the key source that finances continued Russian aggression against Ukraine. The war would have stopped if Russia stopped attacking Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine has never had any intention to attack Russia, just as NATO never had any intention of attacking Russia. But Russia started this war, and Russia continues this war. And now everybody, after several attempts to make peace, and Russia refusing to any sort of peace talks and continuing the aggression, now the only way to, everybody understands that the only way to stop it is to actually make sure that Russia does not have the ability to continue the aggression. And so cutting off the money, the income is one of the ways. And so I think that if they don't want to stop, they have to be stopped. And if providing intelligence and hitting their energy infrastructure is what it takes, then this is what needs to be done.
And speaking of money, how is Kiev reacting to the recent statements that have been made by Ursula von der Leyen with regards to the 140 billion euro credit and that the loan that the EU is going to be giving Ukraine, and they'll be using the Russian assets that have been frozen so far? Russia has called it a violation of international law, but could this tranche actually help Ukraine in the short term?
Well, it definitely will help because, of course, with the shortages of electricity and also with a lot of Ukrainian industry destroyed by Russian attacks, Ukrainian economy is not doing as well as it used to, and also with the restriction on exports, something that Russia has been trying to impose, and so the economy is not doing very well, and Ukraine can use all the help that it can use. So it definitely is welcome, and I think any references to the international law by the Russian Federation, who violates it itself and also has withdrawn from some very important international agreements and violating and actually placing Russian domestic legislation over the international law. I think they have no right to accuse anybody of violating international law.
All right, ma'am. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus away from Europe and towards the Indo-Pacific. Now, we're learning that Australia has signed a new defense agreement with Papua New Guinea, its first in more than 70 years. This comes as Canberra is seeking to block China from expanding its security presence in the Indo-Pacific. Now, under the Puk Defence Treaty, which is the first signed by Papua New Guinea, Australia and its northern neighbour are obliged to come to each other's aid if attacked. The treaty allows as many as 10,000 Papua New Guineans to serve with the Australian Defence Force under dual arrangements. Listen in to what their leaders had to say after signing this treaty.
This treaty contains a mutual defence obligation similar to Australia's ANZUS treaty commitments, where we declare that in the event of an armed attack on either of our countries, we would both act to meet the common danger. Both our nations have also agreed not to undertake any activities or enter into any agreements that would compromise the implementation of this treaty.
It is a landmark for our two nations. This treaty was not conceived out of geopolitics or any other reason, but out of geography, history, and the enduring reality of our shared neighbourhood.
With us on the broadcast is Mr. Charles Thompson, joining us from Sydney. We've just heard what Anthony Albanese and James Marape have had to say. It is a mutual defence pact that has been inked. What exactly has driven Australia to do so? What are the concerns Australia has, especially with China's expanding footprint in the Indo-Pacific and its aggressive posture? Sir, I request you to unmute yourself. You're unable to hear you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you. No, this is everything. This is more to do with Papua New Guinea. I mean, if you study the history of Papua New Guinea, nearly everybody in Papua New Guinea has some connection with Australia. They've either studied here, been trained here. Australia gives a lot of aid. So all of this is really reflecting on China. China wants to have issues with every country in the whole of Asia, Papua New Guinea included. And, I'm surprised. Informally, this would have always been agreed upon, but now, obviously, Papua New Guinea has insisted on having a formal agreement. And I think what the worry for the Chinese is that now that the cat's out of the bag between Australia and Papua New Guinea, other countries in Asia might also start considering doing similar things. And because we all know China just wants to individually bully. And they're bullying Australia as we speak. I mean, the people complain about the Americans, but the masters are the Chinese.
And what is Australia's larger security goal in the region? And because we've been seeing recent deals that have been inked regarding the procurement of submarines as well, the AUKUS deal that has come through. So how does Australia plan to in fact counter this Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific?
It's not just Australia, it's India, it's the Philippines, it's Japan, it's Taiwan. Every single country feels under threat from China. And the only way they can reduce that threat is through mutual cooperation, through countries by geography, just like the Papua New Guinea Prime Minister said, or they have some relationship with the United States. And we're all under pressure from China because China just does what it wants. As far as it's concerned, it's the ruler. And, and it's aggressive. But I must take my hat off to the Chinese. They do it a lot more quietly than the Americans.
And speaking of the Chinese, it's likely to not go down well with them. Could we expect them to adopt an even more aggressive posture in the region?
Look, if you look at what China does, at the moment, China's picked on one of the steel companies of Australia, and it's just quietly, unofficially said, they're not allowed to buy their iron ore. At one point, it was lobsters. Another time, it was wine. The Chinese switch on and switch off as they please across the world with any country that dares stand up to China. And that includes India. That includes Taiwan. That includes every single country in Southeast Asia. China's a bully. Let's face it. And they're growing. And they demand respect. And at the end of the day, because they are, the manufacturing hub of the world, you have to give them respect. You don't have much of a choice. Or you have to look at mutual agreements like Papua New Guinea's just done with Australia.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus towards more news coming in from Sydney. A man has been arrested by the police after he fired some 50 shots in public, wounding at least 16 people. A large contingent of police swarmed the area and locked down the street before entering the property above a business and arresting the man. Now, they seized a rifle from the scene and initially stated that up to 100 bullets were fired and 20 people were wounded. However, the New South Wales Police Acting Superintendent Stephen Parry has now revised the number of shots to around 50 and the toll of those wounded to 16. The accused shooter was taken to a hospital and treated for minor injuries to the area around his eye sustained during the arrest. No charges have so far been laid against the alleged gunman yet, and the investigation into this matter is underway. Shifting focus to East Asia, according to North Korean state media, Kim Jong-un inspected one of the country's newest warships, the 5,000-ton destroyer named Chohyun. This is one of the 2 such vessels launched this year as Kim seeks to enhance North Korea's naval capabilities. During his visit, Kim declared the warship should punish the enemy's provocations, referring to the United States and South Korea. And he also said that it should serve as a deterrent to threats against national security. Kim has also pledged to complete a 3rd destroyer by October next year. Meanwhile, South Korean officials suggest that the ship may have been developed with Russian support, possibly in return for North Korean troops aiding Moscow's war against Ukraine. We've seen recent exercises take place between South Korea, the United States and Japan. We've also seen the bilateral military drills take place between Washington and Seoul, the Ulchi Freedom Shield. Meanwhile, there was a meeting that took place between South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and US President Donald Trump. And in the Oval Office, Trump expressed his inclination to meeting Kim Jong-un again. This comes as South Korea has been extending an olive branch to North Korea to normalize ties. However, this has been rebuffed consistently by Kim Jong-un, who has made it very clear that any demands for denuclearization of North Korea will not be met and that North Korea will continue its nuclear armament ambitions. Shifting focus to more updates we're tracking, according to National Search and Rescue Agency Operations Director of Indonesia, Yudi Pramantio, 54 dead victims and their bodies have now been recovered. Remember, the tragic incident occurred last week at the Al-Khazini Islamic boarding school in Sidoarjo in East Java, when a part of the multi-story building suddenly gave way during afternoon prayers. Excavators and rescue teams have been working round the clock, recovering dozens of bodies from the rubble. Listen in to what one of the rescuers had to say.
Total dari korban semuanya ada 154 orang, yang selamat ada 104, kemudian yang meninggal 50, dan seperti saya sampaikan tadi masih dalam pencarian. Ini perkiraan masih ada 13 orang yang di reruntuhan gedung. Kami menargetkan dari BNPB hari ini kita akan selesaikan pencarian korban. Dari Basarnas maupun dari pihak Kodim sudah mengatur schedule. Diharapkan pada hari ini kita akan selesai evakuasi dari yang diperkirakan, saya ulangi, yang diperkirakan tinggal 13 orang lagi.
Authorities say that illegal construction without proper permits, including adding 2 floors to the original structure, led to the collapse. Experts have confirmed that the building failed to meet safety standards and could not support the additional load. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this bulletin. More news and updates